Hello and welcome to Phrasally Verbocious, a regular podcast wherein two Gearys talk about all things ELT. I'm Chris.
And I'm Alan.
So let's dive in.
Yeah, well, I think I wanted to kick off and say that with a massive disclaimer, which is that I kind of sit in both and maybe all three of these categories of manager, teacher, and something in between, which means that my perspective, therefore, is hopefully useful. And I wanted to kick off by saying that I think I speak for both of us when we talk about how in this conversation, we're talking about well-meaning teachers and well-meaning managers, because we all know that there are not well-meaning managers perhaps in the universe, and there are not well-meaning teachers in the universe perhaps as well. So I think that's an important perspective to keep in mind. I think these questions come from the perspective, I think, of a teacher. So the first one is that what is it that managers don't understand or have forgotten about teaching? And I think it's quite a provocative question. And I think what it comes from is the point of view of somebody who is teaching their 20 plus hours a week, plus their planning, plus their marking, plus their organizing, and has a sort of, and feels a bit perhaps fixed or put upon, which I think can be the case. And I think what can easily not be realized from the teacher's perspective, and what can be forgotten as well from the manager's perspective, is that they're two sides of the same desk, you know. So in the summer when I'm working as a manager, I'm obviously trying to do my best by my staff. That's always been my first priority, because I believe that happy teachers result in happy students, and then you end up with happy parents and happy managers. So everything works out. But ultimately, the job of a manager in, say, for example, timetabling is to get the right number of students in the right number of rooms with the right number of teachers, and not leave a student sort of in a corridor, or a group of students without a teacher, or a room, or a group of students without a room. And in that sense, it can be very much a chess game rather than a game of people. And as teachers, we come to this role, and as teacher managers, I guess we come to this role because we're interested in people. I think sometimes it can be frustrating for a teacher to feel like they're just being moved around like a pawn on a chess set. And actually, as a manager's point of view, I don't like thinking about it that way. But sometimes you have a spreadsheet, you have a timetable, and you have to put things into spaces. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind.
I think it's one that managers haven't always necessarily been teachers either.
That's very true.
Some managers have either never been teachers, and some have only done it to fill in gaps for maybe an absent teacher as well. Whereas, you know, we've worked together in an academy where the DOS had worked in a different academy in the town before creating his own academy. Whereas I've worked in other academies where the DOS has never taught a day in his life, but maybe has a business background, or you would hope has a business background or something. So I do think, there are some great. I think there are some great managers who have taught and know the system and what's expected of a teacher. Whereas there's some academies, and I'm not going to name them publicly, but there are some academies who are bottom line is get students in the door and get them paying.
Right, because they're ultimately businesses, which is how they're
ultimately
paid.
They are, but they're ultimately businesses, but don't see it from the teaching perspective. They don't take into account the planning. They don't take into account the extra prep work we do for classes or the extra workload we take on. They just see it as here's your classroom hours. This is what you're getting paid for. Yes, that.
And we've definitely I'm sure we've both encountered people who have had the experience of working somewhere where they don't really value the prep and administration time that goes into it, which is a really important part of the job, so that you do your classroom hours really well. And I think what also can easily be forgotten, and I therefore try and keep it forefront in my mind when I'm working in the summer as a manager in an office, is that as a teacher, you're working specifically with teaching kids. It's a very isolating job. Even if you've got a room full of adults as your students, you're still the teacher. You're not in a room with colleagues.
Oh yeah, because it's a very public job. It can actually be a very lonely job if you don't have a team around you.
Right.
Just because you have 12 other people in the room doesn't mean to say, I've always said it's a caricature of yourself. It's never yourself in the room.
Right. Well, exactly, and there's no other caricature to work with if you're in that room. And I think it's easy to forget it. I try and keep it forefront in my mind when I'm managing, so that I encourage my teachers to do things socially. I mean, it's a summer school, so it's a bit of an easier environment in terms of getting them to socialize. And I realize that many of us don't necessarily socialize with our colleagues exclusively or even much at all in our usual lives. Especially for people who are quite fixed where they live and they have their normal life as well as their ELT life. Because they can be separate. I did surprise one of my colleagues this week when they discovered I had a social life outside of work. Colleagues, not students, colleagues, was surprised. So I'll encourage them, look, remember, you need to get off site at the weekend, go away, go for a walk somewhere. All of you take a train down to the nearest seaside town and have lunch together or something, just to keep that human side going. So I think that can be easily forgotten inside and that's specifically a summer school issue. But I do think in terms of, we have colleagues, but we don't necessarily talk to them very often.
Yeah, I think it's very important to spot the difference between, I know we talked about this in the professionalism podcast about, it's very easy for a school to say, oh yeah, we have a team of teachers and everybody gets on. Yeah, but do they work together as a team, and do they know each other as human beings?
Right.
When we worked together, there was a good team atmosphere because
Absolutely.
we were given extra hours to come in and plan all at the same time. We had,
yep.
There was what, 12 of us, 11 of us, 12 of us,
11 of us. Yeah.
And you did get to know each other because there was, the DOS did actually make us get on as a team, and it made for there was such a better working atmosphere there. Whereas, yeah, fair enough, everybody might be polite to each other in academy, but you don't know each other. I mean,
no,
academy I was in last year, it was human beings coming and going, and so happened to have the same roof over their head.
Yeah, exactly, and that can be very isolating. I don't think that's very healthy, and I think that's something that managers need to be aware of and keep in their minds, that that we're dealing with human beings, both in the terms of the teachers, but also in terms of the students. And they might remember the students are human beings, but perhaps not so much the teachers. When we joke about the fact, or I joke about the fact that students are always shocked and terrified and horrified and slightly delighted, all four of these things at once, when they see me in the street and they go, oh, you're not in your classroom. But I think the same can possibly be true of managers as well, that they kind of maybe forget that there are things going on outside.
Yeah, there's a human there. Yeah.
Yeah, and not necessarily, and I say forget, I don't mean this, and again, I'm talking about people who are well-meaning. I'm not talking about perhaps people who have no interest. I'm talking about those who do have an interest, but it is easy to forget when you've got, and this leads us on to a second question, really, of what teachers don't necessarily understand about management, is that while the goal of the teacher and the manager would be the same, is it? Well, in the academy, of course.
Is it necessarily?
Providing teaching to students.
Yeah, well, that's what they advertise, but there's some places, as long as there's money coming in.
Yeah, but I'm talking, as I said at the beginning, about well-meaning.
There is well-meaning, but there
professional. But I want to talk about the well-meaning professional run places, because they're the ones where these questions make sense.
Yeah, but there does have to be an awareness of. For example, we had an ex-colleague who was working in a different city after we all left Catherine's.
The same place.
Was working for €800 a month, but they were being given the same amount of hours that we had in our previous job. And he was even saying there's no interest from management as long as there's kids coming into the classroom. Now, he was a very good teacher and still is a very good teacher. But you can only expect so much from when you're being paid 800 quid a month. You obviously want to deliver quality, and yeah, he's a very well qualified, very well educated teacher and does deliver good classes. But there is an issue with, I don't want to say you get what you paid for, but you can't call it a vocation in certain places when the wage is so low.
Right. I don't disagree. But in the sense of where the intention is there and where the intention is good, of course the aim is the same. But what I was going to say is that you're looking at two sides of the same coin, which is that the aim is quality teaching, but the focus of the two different jobs is different.
Yeah.
So the manager is much more interested in the overall organization, obviously, but also the customer facing, which is not the same as the customer facing that the teacher does, which is, okay, the customers are in the room being taught, but they don't interact with the teacher about necessarily satisfaction. They don't necessarily interact with the teacher about paying for classes. That's all done by somebody else, either administration or via the management. They're fully aware that the teacher is not setting the schedule or the timetable. They deal with all that with the administration and with the management. And I think, therefore, what I'm trying to say is that teachers don't necessarily understand the different pressures that management feel because of the literal customer service facing part of their job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's sort of two customer service sides of things, isn't there? There's the admin side.
Yeah.
Who, if they're a student who's been in a private academy for a long time, they're probably going to be more familiar with the admin side as opposed to, they may only know the teacher from September to June.
Yeah.
At the same time, the teachers are sort of on a daily basis the frontline troops. It's our job to sort of put a face on things, get people through courses or exams or whatever. And we do still need to be aware they are still customers and numbers still need to be crunched. But then there's the admin side who are all dealing with sort of sales and the local competition as well needs to be taken into account.
Local competition and also the demands and the needs of the students who are ultimately customers.
Yeah.
And making decisions about what the academy, i.e. the teachers, are prepared or not prepared to do. Do we do short courses? Do we do intensive courses? Do we do one-to-ones? Do we do business? Like all these questions are dealt with at that management level, about making sure, as you say, dealing with the local competition, making sure that academy is viable, making sure that the teachers have employment. So these what might seem to be an irritating decisional situation from the point of view of a teacher might actually be a crucial business decision that keeps that teacher in their job. And I think, like any industry, I don't think ELT is special. Like any industry, the secret or the answer to this is obviously communication, and it's two-way communication. It's communication both upwards to management and sort of upwards and across administration, but also the downwards and the across towards teachers from the management as well.
Yeah, I think there has to be. I think the management, as much business minded as it is, I think the teacher management have to be aware that teaching is different from any other sort of customer facing industry as well.
It's a very strange job.
Yeah, there's a lot of only in this industry do you get X, Y, and Z sort of things, isn't it? But I think they have to think logically because, when we were, say, undergrads or whatever, we've all done 40-hour weeks sitting on a desk. There's no way in hell I would do 40-hour weeks teaching. My record is probably about 38 hours, and I don't even think I was able to speak English by the end of that week. Because that decision wasn't made by a teacher, just because there's a seat in the classroom doesn't mean to say you're sitting on it the whole time.
No, and also again, back to it, just because there's a seat in the classroom doesn't mean that we should occupy it with another student.
Yeah,
and it's all these little things. Unless you've been in the class room as a teacher and experienced the different things that go on, it's very difficult, I think, to empathize. And we have this conversation, across the teacher non-teacher quote unquote divide. I used to, as listeners know, I used to be a high school teacher in Britain, and what people don't know about the job is extraordinary. I mean, you'd think we'd have outgrown the 13 weeks holiday and 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. 5 days a week jokes, but we really haven't. It's because people simply don't really understand what we get up to as teachers in terms of the pressures and demands of the classroom. I think that they can empathise with that. I mean, many jobs have those sort of crunch things. I mean, we're making instant.
There is certain industrial stereotypes as well, right, which doesn't help our cause. Yeah, because I mean, like you said, in the UK, there is always the jokes of, sure, you only work 9 to 3 and you get so many weeks holiday. It's like, well, do you? You know,
and that wasn't my reality.
There's so many ifs and buts. And I think one of the problems, I don't know where the stereotype came from, but we all know, like, a lot of university students or even high school leavers will take what used to be called a gap year, and I can just go over here and teach for a year and then come back home.
Right.
Well, can you? You know, are you gonna get these ones through an advanced class? Might be great activity leaders, great personalities to have in a classroom, but like I was talking to a friend the other night, are you going to successfully teach the future perfect continuous to them? You know,
yeah.
There is still that feeling of people, and I know people who've done it. They've gone, okay, so I'll just go to Asia for a year and teach, and then come back home again, and to use the horrendous term of, I'll get a real job then. Thanks, this is my career.
Yeah, I mean the industry doesn't necessarily always help itself, but in that respect, I think it's questions. What are the two different sides of the coin? Not necessarily understanding. I think it's just like anything else in life, we need to step back a little bit from our bubble.
Communication and empathy.
Imagine, empathize, and communicate, and I think that helps. I think a related question or related questions that might link to this as well is why teachers decide to, or they want to become, or decide to become either teacher trainers or managers. I think from my perspective, it's because it's another part of the job or another facet to the industry. It's another way into. I teach. So I like seeing people develop. And I teach because I like being part of that, you know, and opening doors for people.
I think so many teachers become trainers because what it boils down to is the good ones have a lot to offer based on what they've experienced over the years. It's still a lot to do with the industry as well. Like there isn't with a lot. We've been in amazing academies, but there isn't any upward. You know, it's not the academy's fault. There just isn't any upward career trajectory in them.
No.
And it's maybe a change from what, you know, going into training is maybe a change from what people would have done when they were starting out. But there is actually, as weird as it seems, there is actually quite a wide-ranging spectrum of upward trajectory sort of career paths you can take in ELT.
There absolutely are.
But why people come teacher? I think we have a lot to offer. I mean, you and me do the conferences all the time.
But I think that's what I'm trying to say is that it's a similar, of all of the options available to you, and there are more than there seem. I think it's the one that's most similar to the original desire to be in the classroom, which is to take a group of people, do something with them, and make them see the next step and help them towards the next step. And whether that be me teaching Future Perfect Continuous to a group of teenagers, or whether that be me taking a room of teachers. I mean, I've done CPD. I'm not a teacher trainer, quote unquote. But yeah, it's the same experience. I mean, it's a different experience, but it's also the same experience in that I have a room of people, I have some objectives, I give them things to do, activities to things to discuss, activities to do, and then we walk away at the end and review whether we've potentially learned something towards the objective. So it's ultimately another form of teaching, but different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's, especially with the sort of the conferencing, the networking, and these days the webinars are becoming such a big thing. I think it's very. I mean, look at us. We're doing a podcast. I just think good teachers are teachers who take the job seriously, just have a lot to say and quality to give other people. If I go into a classroom and try something out and it works, I go, here, great idea. Try that. See what you think. Because it's feedback for us as well. It's not just a one-way street. It's like, okay, that didn't work in that class. That didn't work in that class, but that did work there. Why? Let's find out.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons that I like, it sounds awful. I like observing lessons. I like being an observer. It's part of my current role, and it's part of what I do in the summer every year. But I like doing it because I like being in a classroom, first of all. But I also like looking at someone's teaching and then talking with them about it.
Yeah, there's actually quite a lot to be gained from. I know observations for some teachers can be terrifying, but there's actually quite a lot to gain from. I prefer dual teaching as opposed to observation. Observation can be good fun because you see things, and you go, "Oh, it's such an obvious idea. I should definitely be doing that."
I mean, also the opportunities for grand larceny and stealing from your colleagues are great. But I mean,
nothing's original.
Teacher trainer or a teacher manager going in and observing. I realise that can be quite unpleasant or difficult for some teachers. And I think the way that we handle that is important. But I think the reason that I enjoy doing it, and hence the reason that I've going towards the management route, is that I liken with teaching when you sit down with a kid and go, right, what is it exactly about this structure that you're struggling with? Okay, how about if I draw this diagram? Or how about if I give you this example? Or how about if I show you this picture? Does that help you now understand this? And they go, oh yeah, okay. And then they do a bit of practice and then they realize they've got it. Well, I find the same thing with observing. Okay, so how did that go? Well, this was good and this wasn't quite so good. Okay, why wasn't that so good? It's the same thought process, but just in a different context. I think that's one of the things that draws teachers towards training and the kind of management that involves observing. Not necessarily paperwork or spreadsheet management, but actual academic management. And again, I'm talking about well-intentioned professional managers and professional academies where actually development is important. That's why I think they do it. That's why I do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to have to wrap up. That's 29 minutes, and we've got 40 seconds left.
Okay. Well, thank you to those people who joined us live.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for being in our first trial and error, mainly error live podcast.
There was a lot of error, but I think there was some success as well, hopefully.
Mainly error, but yeah, we'll see how this goes live. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Have a happy Wednesday. Bye.